me unmute Lynn, or she can unmute herself. I'm Helene Isaacs. I'm one of the co-chairs of the Arts and Cultural Affairs Committee at the Jewish Center in Princeton, along with my co-host, Lynn Ross. And we are delighted to welcome you all tonight. It's wonderful that you're all here joining us, and we're so happy to have Rabbi Hale and Miriam Lewin and a couple of other folks who Sandy will introduce tonight for this program. And one of the things that we love doing programming is when our congregants come to us with fabulous ideas for programming that they're really interested in. So we both want to thank you, Sandy. Sandy Sussman basically got in touch with us because Sandy had seen this documentary and connected with Miriam Lewin, the director, this past summer in July at the National Havurah Committee's Online Summer Institute, and said this would be a great program. And we said, yes, absolutely it would. So I'm going to turn it over to Sandy to introduce the speakers tonight. And again, please enjoy the program. And I also just want to remind you, the link that you all received in the email that was sent to you with the Zoom link for tonight has the link and the password to view the film. So in case you haven't seen it already, or you'd like to see it again, it's good until the 13th. So that gives you through Tuesday to watch it. So I just want to give you a heads up about that. All right, Sandy.
Great. Thank you, Helene and Lynn, for your support on this. Chag Sameach, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Let's just dive in here. Most of the hour that we're together will be spent on the Q&A session. And the way we'd like that to work is if you have a question about the film, either to Rabbi Hale or to Miriam, please feel free to throw that in the chat window at any time. If you glance at the questions in the chat window and there's something that really catches your eye, you want to know the answer to that question too, put the name of the person who asked the question in your chat comment, and that'll be like voting to make sure that we can judge the interest in the different questions, okay? The other thing I want you to know is that while I brought the idea to Helene and Lynn, the program is being sponsored tonight by the Havurah Minyan. We've been meeting for self-led services for more than 30 years, and through that whole time, despite lots of changes in format, we've kept the emphasis on Torah study, and that for us is our connection to Kevin and the film. If you want to know more about us and our services, we'd love to have you join us. So you can go to the Jewish Center's website and check the Pray With Us section, and we're on the Shabbat page. You'll find the Havurah Minyan there. You've already met Rabbi Kevin Hale, and we're delighted that he can join us this evening, coming to you live from his father's home in Long Island. And Ken Hale, you may recall, there's a point in the film where Kevin points out a picture of his dad. So now we know in whose house he's sitting. A very special guest tonight is Randy Giacchini. Randy, if you just want to wave your hand there a minute. Randy is the editor and principal camerawoman of Commandment 613. She's joining us from Amsterdam, where she now lives, and is working on a master's degree in preservation and presentation of the moving image. And since it's now 1:40 in the morning, Randy, thank you for joining us, and we understand at some point you'll slip away. Lila Tov. We're going to start with Miriam Lewin, who's the director and producer of the film, joining us from her home in Brooklyn. She grew up in Princeton, and her parents, Elsbeth and Frank Lewin, were early members of the Jewish Center. Her sisters, Naomi and Eva, who went to religious school and were confirmed there, are on the call tonight, the Zoom room as well. So this is a bit of a homecoming evening for the Lewin girls. Miriam, why don't you take it away? I know you want to share some photos with us of our Torah's hometown. And again, I'll just remind you, if you have questions about the film, the process of making the film, the work of being a sofer, toss it in the chat room and we'll get to those very shortly. Thanks.
Thank you.
Mary?
I'm so excited to be here. I had always sort of dreamed that I would bring this film to the Jewish Center, and I'm happy that it's happening. I want to welcome one other member of the film crew who is joining us, and that's Dale Bluestein. Now, Dale, I don't know if it's Bluestein or Bluestein. I'm sorry. Dale is in Minnesota, and Dale is the videographer who made the video about the Sushitsa scroll reunion at the Jewish Center. He made that in 2012 when you had that reunion. And I know that the link to that was in the information about this program. I hope you had a chance to watch that as a double feature with Commandment 613. And I know that for many of you, it was bittersweet to watch that because Rabbi Feldman is in it. And I know that you miss him very much. I'm saying hi to Randy because I haven't seen her in so long. We worked together on this film for so long. It's great that she's joining us. And I'm thrilled to have my sisters here too. And there's some of my friends are here, and there's another special guest whom I'll introduce you to in a moment. I have a lot of memories of the Jewish Center. I'm going to talk a little bit because you're my family. I have memories of the old building, which most of you probably don't remember. I know the staircase is still there, but I think that's about it. I remember the classrooms. I remember the scary furnace room and the scary bathrooms downstairs. I remember the scary teacher, Mrs. Navon, who was probably a very nice lady, but my sisters remember her. And the principal, Mrs. Steris, who was wonderful. I remember the old sanctuary. I remember the blue linoleum floor. Raise your hand, anybody, if you remember that. Nobody, Mike Rosenthal, you remember it, in addition to and Arlene, okay.
And the purple and yellow stained glass windows.
The windows, I was gonna say the windows. Those are still my favorite colors, the colors of those windows. And I remember Simchat Torah. I remember parading around the sanctuary. Didn't we have flags, paper flags that were blue and gold, and they had lions on them?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. I don't know where that.
All synagogues had those.
Oh, okay. Anyway, so I have a lot of very happy memories of the Jewish Center. I also want to say that I remember the moral and emotional tenor of the Jewish Center that we were raised in. I remember the civil rights oriented leadership of Rabbi Everett Gendler. I was very small when he came, but I do remember him. And I remember the humble and welcoming and warm atmosphere with Rabbi Herschel Matt. And that's the other guest I want to introduce. You might see scrolling down here. It says Milton Erdfarb, but it's actually Debbie Matt Erdfarb, who is the daughter of Rabbi Matt. There she is, she's waving. And I also want to, many of you might remember her parents, including her mother, who passed away last month. And we remember Gustine Matt very, very warmly and affectionately. Debbie, thank you for joining us. And I assume your husband is there too, Milton. Hi, Milt. And I was also thinking about Rabbi Feldman, and I only attended services with him a few times, but there was always that very warm and sort of human embracing feeling when he was leading a service. I'm glad I got to meet him a couple of times. So about the film, people often ask me what I learned when I was making this film. And the answer is basically just about everything you see. I knew about Torah, but I didn't know there were 613 commandments. I didn't know that the last one was the commandment to write your own scroll. I didn't know that kosher could apply to anything other than food. And I certainly didn't know that the ink came from oak galls. I didn't know what an oak gall was, actually. I learned a lot about the Memorial Scrolls Trust as well, that you heard about. And I'll just give you a little bit of statistics here. As you learned, there were 1,564 scrolls that went from Czechoslovakia to London. And those are now on loan around the world to synagogues, educational institutions, libraries, summer camps, museums, but mostly synagogues. There are about 1,400 of them that are out on loan in South America, Europe, Africa, Australia, but the majority are here. There are about 1,000 in the USA. So I want to talk a little bit about the town that your scroll is from, Sušice, or Sušice is the way I would pronounce it because I speak Italian, but I looked it up and it's Sušice, Sušice. There are actually 10 scrolls from Sušice that are part of the Memorial Scrolls Trust group. And I actually don't remember how many were at the reunion in 2012. Does somebody remember that?
7. There were 7 in all.
It's amazing, isn't it? Yeah. And I have recently met a photographer named Sheila Pelley, who is working on a book that will be released by the Memorial Scrolls Trust later this year. She spent 3 months in the Czech Republic last year taking photographs of the traces of Jews in all of the towns that the scrolls were collected from, 134 towns. And she has sent me some advanced photos of the town that your scroll is from. And if I can share a screen, I'm just going to show you a couple of them. Okay, I hope you are seeing, this is the cover of the book. It's called Light Beyond the Shadows, The Legacy of the Czech Torah Scrolls and the Renewal of Jewish Life in Czechia. So Czechia is another name for the Czech Republic, which, as you may know, Czechoslovakia split amicably between the Czech Republic and Slovakia in 1993. This is obviously an archival photo, not by Sheila, of the street in the Jewish quarter. And this is a square in the town now. It looks very Middle European to me. This is the gate of the Jewish cemetery. And if you look closely, you can see that the design of the ironwork is all made up of Stars of David. And this is a plaque over the cemetery. And I'll tell you a little bit of what it says. It says the cemetery was founded in 1626, believe it or not. It also says that in 1942, the Jews of the town were deported to Theresen or Theresienstadt, and almost all of them were exterminated in concentration camps. The last synagogue in town was demolished in 1964. And this is the final photograph I have. This is from a Yom HaShoah remembrance in the town in 2019. These kinds of remembrances now occur all over Czechia, which I find remarkable. And that is one of the reasons that the subtitle of the book is The Renewal of Jewish Life in Czechia, because it focuses quite a bit on congregations that are restarting, synagogues that have been turned into museums of tolerance and respect, or into museums of Jewish life. And Sheila tells me that there's a real, a warm resurgence of Jewish life, and that the people of Czechia embrace this, which I find very positive. Okay, I'm back.
Knowing that there's 10, you said 10 scrolls from that community, how do you know what the population was or is?
Sorry, I don't think it's that big a town, but I'm afraid I don't know.
Okay.
Somebody want to Google while we're Google and let us know. That's it. That's what I have to say. I'm delighted to be here. I look forward to your questions for me,
Right.
for Rabbi Hill, or for Dale, if you want to ask Dale about the making of the video in 2012.
Kevin, was there, did you want to say anything before we dig in here?
You know, I got to say a lot in the film. You know, I think I want to do a little shout out about Sheila Palais and her work. And she just fell in love with the Czech scrolls. And there's something about these scrolls in particular that elicits that. It was the restoration of a Czech Torah for a synagogue in Sharon, Mass. And Sheila was one of the members of the synagogue that just volunteered to take photographs. And she got really, hooked, and actually came out to my studio and photographed me working. And one thing led to another. And I guess, Mary, I'm really struck by, how much this experience has, to my perspective, I've watched you fall in love with Torah. And the way we fall in love with Torah is particular to who we are. So I think we're all part of that. And that's probably enough to say by way of introduction.
And these scrolls tend to have some sort of a pull on people. I'm now one of those people who sees how people get involved in caring for the scrolls and working on their behalf.
So Miriam, one of the questions is, how did you get involved with the topic? And you told us a number of things that you learned that you didn't expect to, like the ink coming out of the gulls. But the question was, what did you expect to get out of it?
What did I expect to get out of it? Well,
And
I'll
how
tell
did
you,
you-
and how did I get involved? Well, I have always made films for clients with budgets and deadlines plans. And this is the first time that I decided I'm going to be on my own. And fortunately, I had already been working with Randy on a couple of other films, and we kind of wanted to work together and shoot in that, and we encouraged each other. So I was just hoping to have the experience of making a film on my own with a partner, but without a client. And how I got involved in the film is that I said this is a homecoming and my family is here. Well, Kevin is also my family. Kevin is my first cousin. So I've known him for a very long time, but I didn't know much about what he does. And about 4 years ago, he was telling me in some detail, my husband and I were visiting him, and he was telling me about the project with the Memorial Scrolls Trust and how he was one of the approved scribes and how he was planning to write a doctoral dissertation about the scrolls. And I said, that sounds like a film.
Yeah. That's great. Kevin, what's involved in becoming a SOFAIR? What kind of training, how long does it take? This question includes that it looked as if you know the entire Torah by heart. And do you, and is that a requirement? And I guess I would also ask how you become an official SOFAIR of the Torah Trust.
Oh, wow. Those are a lot of great questions. I know there are some people who know all of Torah by heart and standing on one foot. And actually, my teacher, Eric Ray of blessed memory, really he was one of these people who could lane any part of the Torah. And I can only talk about my own training, which was about 4 years, the last 4 years of his life, and it was really a kind of traditional apprenticeship. When you say SOFAIR, I think what comes to mind is someone who professionally does this work, who has his or her or whatever pronoun shingle out as a SOFAIR. And I appreciate Miriam that something that really comes through clearly in the film is this is based on a commandment that is incumbent, ideally, on all of us. Especially excited to see you, Eleni, because I think you took part in the first time that I taught an intensive in mezuzah writing at the Havurah Institute. So the intent of that week-long intensive was that the essential skills of writing a mezuzah, which are 21 and a half lines of Torah, can be learned. And then there's practice. So on one level, you know, for any of us to fulfill the commandment to write Torah, you know, there's halachot to learn, there's craft. My own training, you know, those 4 years, I'd say 3.5 years, I felt like I really am my teacher's student. The last half year, it was the beginning of a sense of I'm a younger colleague, and then there's practice. So when I teach kids, I like to say I'm still working on getting those aleph bet letters, you know, just right. I don't remember the whole question, but the part about so Rabbi Ray had a background in fine art and in museum conservation, and he really brought to the sacred craft of restoring Torahs an appreciation of each Torah and its provenance and the style of writing, the materials, and he was one of the scribes 50 or so years ago who was restoring the Czech scrolls. So about 15 years ago, when I was asked to restore one, I said to the congregation, well, you know, you need permission from the Czech Memorial Scrolls Trust. And they said, yes, Kevin, and it turns out that you need permission to restore it. So I went through a process of applying to be on the approved list. And I would say that it was a delightful process, in part because I got to reflect on my own training, and also that mentioning that I was a disciple of Rabbi Eric Ray really said a lot to the trust, and I was warmly embraced. So I'm considered a privilege to restore these scrolls and really to bring Rabbi Ray's sensibility of respecting the art and history that is in these scrolls in particular.
So Kevin, I don't know if you know that one of your other students in that course at the National Chavra Committee Summer Institute was Rabbi Linda Motzkin from Saratoga Springs.
Sure.
And she was so inspired that she started to write a Torah, to be trained as a soferet. And her unique story is that she lives, you know, in upstate New York, and she has made it a real community event. She takes, Kevin had mentioned in the movie that the parchment that is used is an animal, kosher animal skin that is basically stretched and scraped. And Linda brought her stretcher to the Chavra Institute one year, and my husband and I took that class, and we were standing there scraping the deer hair literally off of the skin so that it could go into a bucket of I forgot what was in it, lye or something, and then more scraping and stretching. So, and she's about 3/4 of the way through the writing process, and writing a full Torah from Bereshit to all the way through. So you've been inspiration, as I'm sure you know, but to some specific people. And of course, in the film, there's a whole experience with Rabbi Linda Potemkin in her congregation, and she was my first roommate at the Chavra Institute. So I got back in touch with her for the first time in a long time, and all of this just keeps getting more and more organic.
Well, I have to say that both Lindas have a story that Linda Motzkin took my class, and then I was very happy to introduce her to Rabbi Ray, and she got to learn with him, you know, towards the very end. And you know, I envy the direction that she's gone of really, you know, doing it all. You know, there's a sort of a question of sustainability, which is that you know, were the source of supply of Torah to be completely cut off. Now, granted, in this country, we have, most of our Torah scrolls are late middle-aged. They're 100, 150 years old, and they've got a lot of life ahead. But to have the capacity to write Torah in whatever place we are, which is what we've done for thousands of years. She's doing it. And it's really very exciting. And the other Linda, Linda Potemkin, was my chavruta in, I have to say, in a former rabbinic incarnation. I was a member of the Reconstructionist Rabbinical Association, and we were chavrutas in rabbinical school, specifically in studying Chumash. And it really is where I started to ask, well, why aren't we also writing Torah? And one thing led to another. So that project was very special for both of us.
Before we leave you in the topic of how to become a sofer, there's a question. Do you know how many sofers or soferets there are in the world?
I really don't. About 7 or 8 years ago, I would have said, I think I know who all the sofrot are, all the women scribes. And, you know, because of people like Linda Mopsky and also Jen Taylor Friedman, there's really this flowering of let me say, people who are not men being scribes and doing this with integrity, and their scrolls are accepted. So, you know, Torah keeps on being new, and we keep on finding brand new ways of interacting, and I think that we're experiencing one of them. But it, you know, I make up this number, and the number that I make up is about 100 sofrim in this country, and it may be 200, but the vast majority are in Israel, where most of what is the original writing is done there. It's about economics. And although I don't know how many, one stunning number that I learned from my teacher was something like 5,000 sofrim were murdered in the Shoah. And with them went all of this, I don't know what we call it, genetic diversity and varieties and information. Relatively few.
Okay. To both you and Miriam, the question, is the collection of Czech Torahs unique, or are there other collections as well?
Kevin.
Well, there I have the same answer. I don't know. You know, okay, what's unique about these scrolls is that they were cataloged. And there are probably thousands of scrolls that one way or another were not destroyed. Were they stolen? Were they hidden? Were they kept in a synagogue and the synagogue just closed up for a few years? But you know, as Jeffrey Orenstein, who I wish I had his accent, explained in the film, there came a point where the Jewish Museum in Prague put out a call that for safekeeping, send your valuables to us. So there are some communities that answered the call, and then there are communities that didn't. And it's because it was a Jewish museum and that they were cataloged that we have some idea of their provenance. And I think that's what's really amazing. You know, Torahs are 304,805 letters. There's another thing that my cousin probably learned is how many Torah letters are in the Torah. So I just lost the train of thought.
About the Torahs going to Prague.
Yeah.
You were saying that Prague had put out the call for the...
Right, and yet we don't know. I'm sorry. The reason I brought up the number is that that's what should be in a Sefer Torah, according to our halachic tradition. No more letters, no less letters, not autograph it on the back. So unless there's some notation on, say, the 8 seam, you know, on the rollers, or documentation, we don't really know very much about a scroll. You could learn a lot about a scroll by looking at its style of writing. You know, there are regional variations. So that's what's incredible, that this is a collection that's intact, more or less.
And
And,
do you know
uh,
how the trust decides who gets to have a Torah for a long-term loan?
Miriam?
them were sent out in the 60s. The trust acquired them in 1964 and they were restored. And I think in the 60s and 70s they went out. And I think, and they made an effort to send them to a very wide range of communities, reform, conservative. I don't know if there are any that are in are there in Orthodox?
Oh, yeah.
Right, but also libraries. One was given to President Carter. There,
Really?
yeah,
The Carter Torah.
the Carter Torah. I'm not sure where it is now. So they made a real effort to not have them go to a particular group. And when a Torah is no longer needed, if there's a merger or a synagogue closes, or it goes back to the trust, which then reallocates it. And I would imagine they have plenty of requests for them. One of them, I just learned this, is going back to a new community in Prague that has just been formed.
Wow.
It's the Torah that was at the summer camp of the conservative movement in upstate New York.
Mm.
And it is going back to a new community that is being started in Prague, which is very moving. Yeah.
That is.
Sandy, I'm going to interrupt you for a second, because what Kevin was saying about the scrolls being collected somehow miraculously at the Jewish Museum in Prague reminds me that I'm often asked, or I'm often told when I speak about these Torahs, oh, well, they were being collected for a museum of an extinct race that the Nazis were going to start. And a lot of people believe that, and it's actually often on the plaque underneath a scroll that's on display. And in fact, we now know that there wasn't really a confirmed plan for that. And this is where I want to give a shout out to Dale. Hi, Dale, who parenthetically is drawn into the web of the scrolls. And he was the cameraman for the interview with Jeffrey Orenstein that was filmed in New York last year. Thank you, Dale.
You bet.
But Dale is working on a film about this myth and where it came from and why it is not true. Dale, do you want to say a few words about that?
Sure, and this certainly would be a topic, a whole other topic for conversation, which would be great to have. My whole journey with this actually, and as I am rewatching the video that we made back in 2012 at the Jewish Center, that's kind of where it all started for me. My own interest started with our scroll at my synagogue here in Minnetonka, Minnesota, at Bet Shalom. And as our rabbi explained from the pulpit, as he pointed to our scroll that was behind glass, that was collected by the Nazis to be used in a museum for an extinct race. It was a great story, and it was fascinating to me. And I always, I remember I was a bit of a World War II buff. I had never heard that. So I started researching it, and the first thing that came up was some research done by the Trust, by a gentleman who used to work at the Trust. His name was Michael Hepner. He had volunteered there for years doing research and community outreach. And the name of the article was The Myth of the Museum to an Extinct Race. And my very first thought was like, well, wait, is this a denier? Is this, what is this? And of course, as I read more deeply, in fact, and again, there are many, many threads to the story, but basically how it became a very convenient story in the aftermath of the war that these scrolls were collected as a plan by the Nazis, when in fact it was this small group of Jews who worked at the Jewish Museum in Prague during the war, probably no more than 5 or 6 of them, who created this plan and essentially presented it to the SS, who were overseeing Prague at the time, specifically one man named Karl Stein, who went to them and said, look, let us collect all this stuff. There's all this Judaica out there in in Moravia and Bohemia. Let us bring it to Prague and collect it. You may want it someday. You know, it could be valuable. And, you know, I don't know what the conversation was, but that was really the plan that they hatched, right? Essentially under the noses of the Nazis. Now, the Nazis were kind of indifferent, and there's a lot of stories of how they kind of coveted Judaica for some bizarre reason. They were interested in it, and they were collectors, but they weren't behind collecting these scrolls. It was a Jewish plan.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Miriam, if you could clarify the timeline between the film that Dale was involved in at the Jewish Center when there was a reunion of the 7 Czech Torahs, and your plan, your conversation with Kevin to make the film. Were the two connected in any way?
No, they weren't connected. So Dale made that film in 2012 about your reunion, and Kevin and I had that conversation in 2016. And at that point, I started doing what I always do when I make a film, which is looking to see what other films are out there. Because if my film's already been made, I'm not going to make it. And I stumbled across Dale's film, which was up online through aggressive Googling. And I said, wait a minute, that's my hometown. That's my home show. And then Dale and I were actually introduced a couple of years later. So that's the timeline.
So you knew of Dale's film before you made yours, but yours was a separate topic because it was focused on Kevin, right?
Right. Well, Dale's film was about that event that took place on that day at the Jewish Center, which was very moving. I mean, to see the survivor from Sushitsa with the scrolls laid out, and to see the crowd in the synagogue that day was very moving. What Randy and I set out to do was something different, with, you know, more of an inquiry into Kevin's spiritual path. Actually, that was not how we started, but that became a theme of the movie. And we were also interested in how other communities regard their scrolls. And we were also interested in actually what Torah means, which is a vast topic, and we didn't get too far into it. But as Kevin likes to remind us, or as well, Torah can mean the scroll, and it can mean the exchange of information and learning. And Kevin paid Randy and me a great compliment one day when he said that the editing process that we were going through was doing Torah.
I wanted to add, you're always very generous and very kind to refer to that video as a film. Thank you for that, Mary. I think that probably maybe more than it deserves. My visit to Princeton over that weekend was really because I had just started becoming interested in the topic, and a woman who I had talked to, Susie Boyer, who was in Los Angeles, who kind of is the U.S. face of the trust. She has just worked for years and years, mostly on a personal level, just because she loves it. And the woman in there, Hannah Gruber, is a very close. I think she was related. So Susie said, look, if you're at all interested in these scrolls, you need to go to Princeton and experience this. So my narrative there was simply to be there and record what happened. And it was lovely to get all of the interaction that I did, and grateful for all the people I was able to talk to, including Rabbi Feldman and Hannah. But I just kind of, I pushed the button on the camera, and it all kind of came to me. I can't claim that I made a film. I wanted to say that.
Okay. Kevin, several more questions for you about the technicalities involved in Torah scrolls. What animal skins can be used?
Well, it's a skin that is a kosher animal, and it's not necessary that the animal be shechted, that is slaughtered in a kosher way. which is why my friend Linda is writing a Torah with deerskin that are supplied by hunters. So it is the skin of a kosher animal, as Eric used to say with his British accent. You know, in theory, you could write on a chicken skin, be very small Torah, but that once the process of preparing that kosher skin begins, it needs to be done for the sake of the mitzvah. And really, that's something that I allude to, that really every element is done intentionally for the purpose of Torah or things related to it. But you know, the essential requirement is that it be an animal that were it shechted, it would be kosher to eat. Kosher is more than food.
So maybe the chicken skin could be a mezuzah parchment or something for a very small mezuzah, right? Kevin, what about the different styles of Torah writing? How personalized is that, or regional, or, you know, in the film, we see the one with the very fancy three-pronged tops. What can you tell us about the style of the writing?
Well, that was a delightful Torah to rewrite. You know, I've often asked, you know, how many scrolls have you written? And I have to say, I've not written an entire scroll, but part of my work is, you know, I like to think of myself as a bit of a forger. My teacher, Eric, really did forge actually papers so that survivors could get out of DP camps and get to Palestine. But I will really pay attention to how the letters are formed. And this is a particular style that, you know, if it looks like printing, it's because it's related to this high form of medieval Spanish square script, rather than the really more familiar in Torah Beit Yosef Ashkenazi script. What's cool about that script is that it was connected with also Portuguese Sephardi, and I have some family history that's connected. So when I was writing that Yiriyah, that panel, you know, thinking, oh, this is the kind of script that was familiar to my great-grandfather if he happened to lane in his Portuguese Sephardic synagogue in Hamburg 120 years ago. You know, to get down to a sort of more granular level, broadly speaking, there's an Ashkenazi way of writing on parchment with a quill pen, and a more Sephardic way of writing on skin, that is on the hair side, with a more fluid pen, as I said, like a marker. And that particular script was a Sephardic style that, if it was medieval, it would have been written with a reed pen, but it was done with a quill. So many regional styles, some of them are based on history and politics, some of them are based on what are available materials. And, you know, yes, every scribe has a different hand. Occasionally you'll see a scroll that it's all written at the same time in the same style, but obviously different handwriting. Well, that's because they were regional styles. I find it very difficult to discern, was it the same scribe? But every once in a while you can see, you know, oh, 3 different scribes did this together and their styles were similar.
Does it make a difference for you if the original scribe was right or left-handed?
It doesn't make a difference for me. I'm you know, I guess I have the privilege of being right-handed, which for Ashkenazi writing that is using a quill, you know, which is like a chisel, left-handed is challenging. And in fact, if you follow the same directions, you'd be chiseling into the parchment. You know, I don't think about it, to be honest. You know, I'm always using my right hand, and you know, the word drawing comes to mind, that I'm drawing the letters out. But if I were lefty, I would have to be reversing the direction. I will. Lovely, lovely question.
Okay. Do you happen to know how old the oldest Torah still in use is? Or an idea of
Well,
how
I
old?
don't know for sure. Now, a great story that was caught on cassette tape of when Rabbi Ray and his wife Lolly, and actually his wife Lolly passed away just a few days after that initial filming. They were in Curacao, and Eric, Rabbi Ray, was evaluating their 25 scrolls, and on tape he says, "Oh, this is the oldest scroll, kosher scroll in the Western Hemisphere, written in the 13th century," and you can hear Lolly in the background saying, "Oh, come on, Eric." But there are scrolls that really are that old, and I should have Googled this, but I believe it was in Tuscaloosa. The synagogue was curious about its very old scroll and had carbon 19 dating done, COVID, and I believe 12th century. So we have fragments of Torahs that are older, and of course the Dead Sea Scrolls are Torah text, but not necessarily written as a Sefer Torah. But I think pushing 1,000.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's impressive. Miriam, the phrase "left on the cutting room floor," I know you shoot to make a 23-minute film might be 40 hours of footage. What did you have to leave out?
You're actually close. I counted it up. I think we shot about 33 hours for a 23-minute film.
Is that all?
Yeah,
felt
poor
longer, I
Kevin.
guess.
This was not a fly on the wall film. Things that he was forced sometimes more than once. So it certainly felt like more than 33 hours. Yeah, so the cutting room floor is deep. Some of my favorite things were Kevin analyzing each of the Torahs and pointing out to somebody from the congregation, this is the script style, this is the weight of the parchment, which indicates its age, the size, how old it is, where it might have come from. And these are fascinating things, but we just didn't have time to go into that. And also we interviewed a lot more people than you saw there. So I would have liked to include more of them, but editing is often a process of reducing and reducing. And when we decided that it was going to be a short film, not a feature film, we wanted to get it short. And I actually, at one point, it was 45 minutes long, and then we wanted to make it 18 minutes long, because that's a nice number. And as it happens, 23 minutes turns out to be a good length, because we can do these kinds of things. Often we do the screening of the film and the Q&A all together within an hour, or for classroom use, which I will start pushing for sometime next year, it can be used within an hour.
Mm-hmm. So Randy threw a note into the chat saying, also on the cutting room floor, sofer means counter. Do you want to expand on that at all?
Kevin.
Oh, I thought that Miriam, you would do that.
No,
Yeah.
I love that. That yes, we tried to get that in.
Well, there are perfectly good words for writer or author or calligrapher, but sofer is like lispor, to count. And I'm not sure if this is really the etymology, but I'd like to think, oh, I'm a sacred accountant and responsible that every one of those 304,805 letters is there and properly formed and accounted for. And just, I love the connection. I think it's a coincidence, maybe not, that, we have a connection between Sefer, book, Sipur, story, and Sofer, basically between counting and recounting in English.
Right.
And I don't know if that's, the connection is the same in both languages. But it points to, in order to write a kosher Torah, you would follow our halachic tradition, and the letters would be formed correctly and done with the intention that it fulfill this commandment. But if it's not, the most beautiful script, it doesn't make it less kosher. So, there's on a certain level, whether or not it's kosher is an accounting task. But then there's an artistic task, and I guess I refer to hidur mitzvah. And this is where really every Torah that's written is individual, and it reflects the experience of whoever's writing it. So I think we keep on reaching for the most beautiful Torah we can, but accountants don't necessarily need to pay attention to that aspect.
Right. So we have just about 5 minutes left, and a couple of people, Kevin, would appreciate if you would share more about your spiritual awakening or calling that you allude to in the film.
Sandy, in 5 minutes?
You'll do your best.
So I don't think I can fully address it, but now, Lewin family and Hale family, I think different approaches, but we're all Yekids. And in my family, there was really, as it didn't get off on the cutting room floor, that some sense of there's this old-fashioned idea about Torah, religion, God, and it's not that we know better, but that's really old-fashioned. And I was always curious about that. And, my own path is one that I think, for my generation was very common, and for the next generation, not so common. And that is looking at the question of, well, what is it about being Jewish that was so important that they tried to kill us? And that was something that I followed, but I think it's individual. And to discover that there's this language that is God language that actually has meaning, and it has meaning for each person in a different way. It really opened up a whole world. And I would say that, let's see, I've been on this path about 30 years, and at least the first 10 were focused on getting over embarrassment to the wider world, but even within my family. What kind of thing is this for a nice Jewish boy to be doing? So the other thing I want to say is that I made a commitment to Miriam, which is if you really want to make this film about me and my work, I will be the most loyal and cooperative subject that ever existed. So I've kind of withheld questions about what's this film about and how long is it going to be, and but I've imagined that there's a curiosity about what's the story there? I mean, especially the Hale side of the family. How did you discover meaning in this? And I think that maybe that's another film and another question. But part of my story is that I was a toy maker before studying to be a rabbi, and I think I've always been very connected with the concrete. As I said before, in another context, I believe in mysticism, but I don't really do it myself. But there's something about Torah, and the physicality is compelling, and the sense that this is the Torah that is descended from the source of Torah that drew me in. And I suspect that many of us have stories that are their versions of this. So there's the beginning of an answer.
It's a good one. Thank you.
Very happy doing this.
Okay, you want to make another film, Karen?
Sorry, Mary. I think I talked over you, Miriam.
Oh, I asked Kevin if he wants to make another film.
You mean me or you?
You, together.
I don't know how to make a film.
Sorry, Sandy.
That's okay. Kevin, I do appreciate that. That's probably the one question you can't answer standing on one foot. But I think I think your the love of Torah comes through in the film. You know, you ended your comment by saying, what can I tell you? I'm very happy doing it. That oozes out of the film, which is, of course, a compliment, Miriam, to you and the rest of the production team. But it was a heartwarming film in the most physical, literal sense of the word. So thank you. Thank you, Kevin and Miriam and Dale. So glad you could join us. And Randy, if you haven't gone off to bed at 2:30 in the morning yet, you should. Again, to Helene and to Lynn, thank you for taking my suggestion and running with it. And everybody, so glad you could join us tonight.
Thank you. And I want to thank my
Hugs.
sisters and my brother-in-law for coming, and my old friend Debbie Matt. Yeah, it's great.
Thank you,
Well, it's
Sam.
very sweet to have you back at the Jewish Center, so it's
Can
a
I
nice
just say,
reunion.
can I just say one thing? I think Debbie Matt's brother is speaking at the Jewish Center next week. I think he's speaking about Kabbalah, and if anyone is interested in that, they can reach out to Helene and Lynn.
That's great. That's great.
Okay, you're clearly
Yeah,
connected
very good.
to the family that we're interested in.
And we want to thank Sandy. Sandy, we'd like to thank you again for making the suggestion. And if any of you on this Zoom have other suggestions, keep them coming.
And if
and again,
anybody, and if
we'll
anybody
view
is
the film
interested,
for 2 more days.
and if anybody is interested in screening for another organization, please let me know. Helene can give you my email address.
Absolutely.
Right.
So we have the special practice that we extend the Chag for 2 more days, unlike anywhere else in the world. It's wonderful.
All right.
Thank
Be
you.
well, everyone.
All right, thank you
Sandy. Thank you,
again.
Helene
Thank
and
you,
Lynn.
Lynn.
Good night.
Thank you, Heidi. Thank you, Helene.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You'll be well.